Well, let's see. We are starting week 3 already. I said it went quickly, and indeed it does. I want to talk to you just a little bit about the machine stops. Again, back to literary analysis. I'm kind of going to start there this week. You had a lot of questions on the story. I think a pretty darn good story considering it was written in 1909. But let's go back to the idea of analysis and if you had to write an analytical paper over the story. There's so many. You could almost go down your short story term list, and there's enough to do. You could cover every one of those topics. Again, when you're writing an essay, you want depth, not superficial comments. You want well-developed ideas, well-developed paragraphs, not short, choppy ones. So choosing which terms you think you might best be able to work with to develop a story and analyze it for everyone, readers who have never read the story that might pick up your essay. You're free to do what works for you. But here's kind of where I would go on this particular story. I think the characters, the two main characters, are incredibly interesting. Vashti, who the story is about, the protagonist, and certainly Kuno, an antagonist, the anti-force, who is the admirable positive character in this particular story. He's the hero of this dystopian nightmare. And the names of these characters are certainly worth analyzing. Vashti is symbolic. Vashti actually is also an illusion because it echoes a story, a biblical story. And I think I've mentioned several times now that most allusions are either to the Bible or to Greek mythology. And here you have characters that go both ways. Vashti, in the Bible, in the story of Esther, the book of Esther, was the queen that King Xerxes called out to, let's just say, dance for his big party of men. And keep in mind, this is ancient times, and she decided she didn't want to perform in front of these men and refused the king's order. And by the way, the king was pretty sloshed when he asked her to come out and dance before all of these men. For that refusal, Vashti was banished from the kingdom and forced to live a very isolated life. So this choice of Vashti, also translated the beautiful one, with Vashti looking pretty much like a fungus, probably not so beautiful. So there's some irony as well in this name choice, but she certainly was isolated to an underground cell. Kuno, another interesting name choice, to say the least, comes from kind of Greek. And Kuno, let's see, is derived from Greek stories, but also a German translation, Kuni, I want to make sure I got that right, means brave. And in this case, Kuno was brave physically. One of his big problems, he was too muscularly adept in this very passive society. It was a demerit to have muscles. But he also had a very curious mind. So he was an exception to the rule, and his brave curiosity made him exceptionally admirable. He went against every rule the society dictated, and many times, where is the line when that becomes a must, if you're going to like your own self? So certainly the characters, the names, and the stories behind their names would give you a lot to analyze. More, it would give you an extremely well-developed paragraph. There are several allusions in this story. I'm just going to talk about two. First of all, what is it that so fascinates Kuno? It's the constellation of Orion. This shape of the stars in the sky, a man with a sword, and there are lots and lots. I just Googled. There's lots of different Greek mythological stories about Orion. Most of them agree that Orion was brave in one way or another, and because of his bravery, he was elevated to the heavens. So certainly there's this connection between Kuno, who is our brave rebel, and Orion, whose bravery elevated him to forever, stand above all in the sky. And again, it is this constellation that absolutely pushes Kuno over the edge. He's got to do some exploration for himself. He is a skeptic, and I think that's a mark of being an educated person. Optimism, if you're overly optimistic, if you're just optimistic about everything, you're a little naive. If you're a pessimist, you're a little dark. Optimist sees everything coming up roses, and a pessimist sees everything. I always think of Eeyore, Winnie the Pooh, just nothing's going to happen to me. But what I think an educated person wants to be is a skeptic. That's just one who questions and goes, wait a minute, 2 + 2 is supposed to equal 4, and something isn't adding up here. A well-reasoned person is a skeptic, one who just questions, who doesn't take things at face value, who doesn't, again, assume that they're getting took, but has some healthy distrust of just things that are dealt out. Do you question? And Kuno certainly was a questioner. There's another interesting allusion, and again, a literary allusion is a reference to something previously written that the author expects his audience to pick up on. There's this line in the story, "We have come back to our own," it says right at the end. "We die, but we have recaptured life as it was in Wessex when Alfred overthrew the Danes." Now, you can easily read on past that and get the story. But really digesting it, what is this story of Alfred and the Danes? Well, in 878 AD, that's going back quite a ways, there was no England as yet. Anglo-Saxons kind of ruled that part of the world, and known as Wessex. King Alfred was a very brave king who took on the Vikings who had invaded the land and defeated them. And they began anew with a very, for the time, I guess we would say a very democratic society in many ways. Yeah, there was a king, a monarch, but there was input allowed. Well, you can see why it fits in here well, that we're going to recapture life, take out the Vikings, those who worship the machines, and carry on in a better world. Imagery, wow, there's so many images you could work with in this story. I want to talk just a little bit about the very first sentence in the story and almost the last sentence. The story begins, "Imagine, if you can, a small room hexagonal in shape like the cell of a bee." So you have this image of a honeycomb that describes the inner structure. There's all these small little rooms, hexagonal in shape, that are identical to each other, identical across the whole world, and they only accommodate one person. And of course, the queen bee in this honeycomb world would be the machine. In the very last paragraph of the story, the whole city was broken like a honeycomb. Well, what happens when a honeycomb breaks? Some bees will die as they fight their way through, But eventually, there will be a regrouping and a new civilization, if you will emerge. And as Kuno and Vashti take their last gasps of air, um, Kuno says, basically it's okay because there's going to be people emerge, people who have lived through this, who are smart enough to get out. And some of these people will live and join them, and there will be a new society, and we will never, never, never succumb to the power of technology again. Well, that may be a little optimistic. One other image that I think is just a must. This was one of your questions. They talk about defeating the sun. Now, obviously, they're underground, and they're no longer in touch with nature or the sun, which has affected humankind since day one. Used to be the sundial that, clocked the time. Farmers, a sun up and sun down. It's before electricity. It's when you got up and got out in the fields at night. You couldn't see. It was time to go to sleep. And we've become, I think, more and more detached from that, but we're still on the top of the earth. This society has gone totally underground. They are detached from the most basic constraints of science, such as the sun and all that it does, the moon. They are buried alive, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. There's just not much first-hand thinking going on at all. And then that's discussed throughout the story. To the point that when the machine breaks, nobody has the ingenuity or the creativity to know how to begin to fix it, and they are doomed. So if you're putting an essay together, you would have plenty to do with characters, imagery, allusions, intro, conclusion. You've kind of got a literary analytical essay. So kind of as you're reading your works, just keep thinking, what would I do if I'm going to analyze this piece of literature? How would I set it up? What would I plug into? As you read, start marking in the margins. Wow, that's an interesting allusion, a symbol. Make your own little code. But the more you interact as you're reading, like pen or marker in hand, the better your reading comprehension will be. The easier time you will have with analysis. Okay, what are you doing this week? Well, okay, a lot. I'm going to be real honest. You have a very short story to read, a very short poem to work with, and then a little lengthier story. So there are 3 pieces of literature this week. Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. is a satire. A satire, you're making fun of a particular folly or vice to make a point. Some people really enjoy satire. It's akin to sarcasm. You are making fun of, and other people not so much. I personally love it. And this story, the first time I read it, I laughed out loud because you catch on, I think, very quickly to what's being made fun of. And at first reaction, you're like, oh, I can't believe he even dares make fun of this. It's like a treasure. I don't want to give too much away. It's so politically correct. But he makes quite a point as he's going through this exaggerated, hyperbolic story. And that's about all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to give too much away. It is go into the story knowing it's satire and that he's using humor, because satire is humorous in order to make a point. Keep in mind, it's dystopian. Then you read a poem titled Dystopia that I think in a few very short lines does a really good job of capturing what it would be like to live in a dystopian society. I think there's lots of imagery that, at least for me, harkens back to Stalin's reign of terror over the USSR, um, where people got to the point that they kept their eyes down as they walked along the sidewalk and didn't look to the right or left, because even the hint of individual thought, individual questioning, could land you in a gulag or with your head shot off. So kind of keep that setting in mind, because I certainly think Josh Gibbons is dealing with some of those Stalinistic images as he delivers his commentary on what it would be like to live in such a controlled world. Your last story, personally think, is the most bizarre one you will read this semester, or maybe ever. We Ate the Children Last. This story, written by Yann Martel, how many years ago? Book, then a movie. The Life of Pi was released. He's that author. And The Life of Pi was a little bizarre, so yeah, there you have it. I don't want to give it away, but ponder for a moment before you begin reading the story. Ponder the title. We Ate the Children Last. Just kind of keep that in mind. It is a story that takes on, again, in a hyperbolic fashion. It makes fun of a lot of things. It makes fun of medical progress going too fast, human, how shallow humans can be as we jump onto the latest trend, even dares to make fun of charities. If you do not know the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible, I would take 2 minutes and Google just summary, the Good Samaritan, or you will miss how very cleverly Martel is making his point when he refers to the story is set in France, Les Bons Samaritans, the Good Samaritans, a charitable organization in France who has borrowed the title from the title of the Good Samaritan story in the Bible, but you've got to kind of weave all of that together for it to make sense. Discussion posts, again, your discussions are to connect the story in some way to some current aspect of life, something that is going on right now. Hope that's making sense to you. One thing I did notice, some of you are rushing just a bit, I think, when you are reading your questions. Maybe read them more than once. Maybe read them out loud. Because maybe you're picking up a part of it, not the whole question. Just be a little more careful when you read your assignments, and I think you will do better if you're struggling a bit. Let's see, we'll meet with conferences again, and I do want to emphasize, please, 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 come into those conferences with something we need to talk about. You've got some graded assignments, quite a few by this point in time. So if you would like clarification as to any grade, that's a really good time to talk about it. I don't want to bog you down with too much reaction and commentary and feedback. If I don't give enough, this is a time to really clarify that. One more time, don't forget to look at your weekly commentaries. They are in content, weekly commentaries, and I go through and rather specifically hit assignments from the previous week so everyone is clear, because I don't want you going into writing an essay and thinking you were on track and having something amiss that'll throw your essay off. So please take time to review those comments. Okay, I think that's it for this week. Don't procrastinate. Budget your time, because you do have 3 different pieces of literature to work with this week. A little Dropbox assignment, discussion post on each one. Yeah, I know that means more for you. It means more for me to grade, but we're in a 7 weeks content course, just the way it kind of falls. Um, let me know if I can help, and have a good week.